Well, thank you very much, Bowen. That was a nice introduction. I'm so delighted to be here. I have heard about OURFA²M² ever since it started, and I have wanted to join. So I'm just tickled to be invited to give a talk today. What I want to talk to you about is something near and dear to me, which is community and belonging in mathematics. Oh, I see. Okay. Welcome to our community. You belong here. I want you to absorb those words for a minute. Welcome. You are welcome in our community and you belong here. I think these are very simple words, but they're very powerful words. And I think they can do a lot to advance underrepresented groups in mathematics. In Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, she said, "At Princeton, I needed my Black friends. We provided one another relief and support. Performing as well as everyone else is doable, of course. Minority and underprivileged students rise to the challenge all the time, but it takes energy. It takes energy to be the only Black person in the lecture hall or one of a few non-white people trying out for a play or joining an intramural team. It requires effort, an extra level of confidence to speak in those settings and own your presence in the room." Talithia Williams, a mathematician at Harvey Mudd, has a very similar feeling, a similar experience to Michelle Obama's that she had at her time at Spelman. Well, I mean, Michelle Obama was talking about when it's difficult to be the only Black person in a room. Talithia wanted to talk about how great it feels to be all Black people in the room. I'd like you to listen to what she has to say.
When I was in a classroom with all Black women, I was never ever aware of my race or my gender. I was always just sort of enthralled with the mathematics and just consumed by it. That it never occurred to me that I was like a Black woman doing math, or a woman or a person of color doing math. Because we all were. And so it just, it I think gave me much more space to think about mathematics in a way that I noticed changed when I got in other spaces. And also like finding a group to study with and to, like these things just came so easy that it just felt like math was easy. It's like, oh, this is easy. Everybody wants to be in my group. My teachers love helping me. Like, it just felt like, who wouldn't want to learn math like this? This is just awesome, When I was in a classroom.
Exactly. So let me tell you what I'm talking about. I'm talking about community. A community is a group of people sharing a common interest or characteristics that is perceived as or perceives itself different from the larger society in some way. Communities can normalize our experiences, but I conjecture that they can change the face of mathematics. An alumna of the summer mathematics program said, "It was wonderful to participate in a community where everyone liked math and where wanting to go for a PhD wasn't some weird, special, ambitious thing to do, but just a normal career option. It was all the more valuable for the fact that I also didn't have to worry about monitoring myself to fit in despite being a woman. I was surrounded by all sorts of women I could relate to, admire, and learn from. Keeping in touch with the SMP has really helped me stay determined to continue pursuing my PhD." When we feel like an outsider instead of a member of the community, we're constantly scanning the room for threats. We're not that far evolved from our prehistoric ancestors, and we're on the alert at all times for danger. Cohn, Schaefer, and Davidson showed that when friends or loved ones are nearby, our bodies react less to stress. We are allowed to calm down and focus more. So being a part of a community is healthier for your body and allows us to use our whole brain capacity. We can focus on what's in front of us. Another SMP participant said, "Studying mathematics in a group of women students is the best. People explaining things so that everyone can understand. People explain things so that others would understand. And people kept telling each other, 'Good call, great idea,' or 'You're brilliant.' You don't hear that studying with guys. It is very reassuring to discover that almost everyone else has the same insecurities and self-doubts. And when you realize everyone else's are unfounded, it starts to chip away at your own. This is not a new idea. Oswald Veblen, some of you may recognize that name, first professor hired at the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton. He said every human being feels the need of belonging to some sort of group of people with whom he has common interests. This idea of belonging is not new. What is this belonging? It's the extent to which an individual feels accepted, valued, and legitimate within the community. This idea of belonging, as I said, is not new. This is from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that beyond food, water, rest, and security, we need belonging to be able to progress any further in this pyramid of self-actualization. We need to feel like we belong to some place, some group of people. Social psychologist Gregory Walton said that a sense of belonging can affect motivation and persistence. And psychologist Angela Duckworth said that passion and persistence are the secret to outstanding achievement. So without feeling like you belong to a community, you're less likely to hang in there when obstacles arise, less likely to find the inner fortitude to continue, less likely to make outstanding achievements. That feeling of not belonging can fall into a negative feedback loop. If you aren't sure you belong, if you aren't sure that you belong, everything can sound like confirmation that you don't. When your mom calls and says, "Oh, are you really taking the right classes for you this term?" Or when your best friend said, "I always thought math was a weird thing to study," or any of these kind of things can give you some self-doubt. And if you're already thinking, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't study math," they can add to that and make you think, "Wow, they're right. I really shouldn't be studying math, that this is not the right fit for me." People who are unsure or stressed about their belonging then have much less time to spend doing mathematics, because too much of their mental time and energy is spent on concerns that they do not belong. So I've certainly been in this situation where I've been in a room taking a test and I think, maybe I really wasn't supposed to be in graduate school, or maybe I really wasn't supposed to take topology. And I think that this test is going to show that this wasn't a good fit for me. This wasn't a good choice for me. And then I suddenly look at the clock and realize I just spent 10 minutes worrying about something and not focusing on the exam. And all that mental energy went into something parallel and not being spent on mathematics. We hear a lot these days about fixed mindset and growth mindset. Fixed mindset is a belief that math ability is something you're born with. You're either born to be a mathematician or you're not. And growth mindset is that math ability is something that you can grow and improve with time and hard work. It's been shown that growth mindset is actually the right way to think about mathematics, that as you continue to work on mathematics, you continue to grow and improve with your hard work. And these psychologists showed that fixed versus growth mindset in a classroom affects your feelings of belonging. So if you have a growth mindset, if you believe that you can continue to improve your abilities, then you are more apt to have a feeling of belonging, feeling like you belong in that place, that your hard work will pay off and you will continue to grow and you can be a mathematician. But they also show that a sense of belonging, even more strongly than self-identification as a math person, has the power to predict one's academic persistence. So what that's saying is that it's more important that I feel like I belong in the space than it is that I see myself as a math person. So if I feel like I belong, then I'm more apt to persist and keep going than if I view myself as a math person. Then sometimes you think, well, maybe I'm not a math person today. Maybe that's really showing me that I should not be a math person. And so you have to, if you have this growth mindset, then you continue to work harder. Again, in another quote from Becoming, Michelle Obama said, "It's hard to put into words what sometimes you pick up in the ether, the quiet, cruel nuances of not belonging, the subtle cues that tell you to not risk anything, to find your people and just stay put." The lack of sense of belonging may explain much of the underparticipation of members of marginalized groups in mathematics. Belonging may help us to level the playing field. When we are part of a community, we don't have that little voice whispering to us that this is not our game. We shouldn't be playing. We don't belong. A member of the Infinite Possibilities Conference said, "I think that particular conference was a great place for anybody who was sort of questioning, did they really belong? Is this really the right place for me? Are there people like me who do this kind of thing?" And I think it was a great place to just get reinforcement that if this is something you really like and you're willing to work hard at it, there are people here who want to help you, and the people that look like you, that agree with the things that you're interested in, that are willing to support you on your path. So let me tell you about a few different communities to which you can belong in mathematics. One of them certainly is the OURFA²M community. This is a group of people who, yes, I agree, Lee, I totally agree. This is something that a group of people put together and built so that you can come together and talk to each other and help each other and work together and make friends and have this community, someplace where you can feel comfortable and like you belong. The Mathematical Association of America, which is one of the sponsors of this conference, is a place that I feel very comfortable. I feel like these are my people, and I love going to the conferences every summer, the Math Fest conference, and getting to catch up with people. It's like an old family reunion. The MAA has another community within another sub-community called Project Next that some of you may want to learn more about. It's for new PhDs, and it's for PhDs who are interested in going into teaching. So it builds a community of new PhDs every year, and they work on learning how to be good teachers. And the former director of Project Next said, "We work hard to develop great sections about innovative, effective teaching, but the most valuable thing we provide is space for new math faculty to meet each other, to create a support group, and to build community." These are important communities, it's true, but I really want to focus today on communities that support members of underrepresented groups. So here are some examples of those communities. The National Association of Mathematicians started in 1969, and it's primarily for Black and Brown mathematicians to find a group that they can work in. It was in response to some things that happened in the 60s where Black and Brown mathematicians did not feel welcome at some of the national conferences, and this started in response. The Association for Women in Mathematics started in 1971, a little over 30 years ago, to support women studying mathematics. SACNAS, the Society for Advancing Chicanos, Hispanics, and Native Americans in Science, started 30 years ago. Sorry, I'm off, aren't I, by a ways, 50 years ago, to support those groups. Enhancing Diversity in Grad Education started in 1993. That's a group for women and non-binary mathematicians every summer that meets to prepare people to go on into graduate school. The Nebraska Conference for Undergraduate Women started in 1999, a conference every January. If you haven't been, you should definitely go. It's a wonderful conference. Math Alliance started in Iowa at some of the Regents universities in Iowa to try to increase the number of members of underrepresented groups that go on to graduate studies in mathematics. They have quite a nice structure now to support people interested in math. The Infinite Possibilities Conference that I mentioned before is for women of color in mathematics. women in number theory. There's a large number, the Association for Women in Mathematics has a large number of these specialty math organizations for women. Women in Number Theory, I believe, was the first one of these that supports women studying, women's conferences for women in number theory get together and talk about number theory, talk about different areas of mathematics. One of the Field of Dreams participants said, "This is the first conference to which I have been where I saw so many mathematicians of color, and this was affirming that I too belong in this field and proves that the face of mathematics is changing with my generation. For the first time, I networked with many fellow mathematicians who look like me, and this powerful experience truly resonated with me." Carla Cartwright-Williams said, "Participation in EDGE changed my life. The opportunity to live and learn amongst like-minded peers, all working towards a common goal, was a totally different experience that I had as an undergraduate. I was part of a community and I belonged." Okay, so if you notice the dates on the communities that I mentioned, some of them started 50 plus years ago. 3 of them did. But many of the other communities that I talked about, Project Next, the summer mathematics program at Carleton that I'll be talking at length about in just a minute, the Enhancing Diversity in Graduate Education, the Nebraska Conference, the Math Alliance, the Women in Numbers, they're all much more recent. Why did it take so long? Well, there are a couple of reasons. One is that forming these communities has been in large part left up to just individuals. It took, just like OURFA²M², it took a group of individuals to say, hey, we need to build a community here. We need to come together and take care of each other in this community. And I'm up for the challenge of building that. That's important work to be done. And now, much of the research by social psychologists that I was talking about earlier is from the past 30 years. The research showing us that these sorts of communities are very important. So in a few years ago, the National Science Foundation, one of the sponsors of this conference as well, the OURFA²M conference. So the National Science Foundation awarded an Includes grant to 5 of us. I was one of the PIs on this grant, as was Ruth Haas from the Smith Center for Women in Mathematics, Judy Walker of the Nebraska Conference for Undergraduate Women in Math, Amy Radenskaya from the Enhancing Diversity in Graduate Education, me representing the Carleton Summer Math Program, and a couple of social scientists got together to study the effects of these sorts of communities, these communities that focus on, in ours in particular, we looked at focusing on women, but also those who focus on members of underrepresented groups. So what happened in our grant is we identified 1,531 past participants from these programs listed here. 198 of them were randomly selected for a quantitative study. So we gave them pages of questions and asked them about their experiences. But today what I want to focus on is one particular question from the qualitative study. So of those 1,531, we looked at 34, we randomly selected 34 who had earned or were working towards a PhD in math and did an extensive qualitative interview. That is, someone called them on the phone and talked to them for over an hour, asking them all kinds of questions. Here's the one that I want to point out to you right now. Do you think you would have stayed in mathematics without your experience in an enrichment program or conference in mathematics? Of the 34 students who are graduate students who were interviewed, or recent PhDs who were interviewed, 22 of them simply said no. I want you to think about that for a minute. 34 people were randomly selected to be interviewed. 22 of those 34 said that they would not have stayed, they would not have gone for a PhD or stayed with their program if they hadn't had this enrichment program, this given them this community. 5 were unsure. 3 were unsure, but said that they would have been less successful, and only 4 believed that they would have gone on to get a PhD in mathematics. If you want to see more results of this study, you can look at www.womendomath.org, and all the results of the study are there. That's pretty amazing, though, when you think about it. Over 2/3 just said that they would not have gone on to a PhD in mathematics without being part of a community. Now, Toni Morrison told us, I tell my students, when you get these jobs that you have been so brilliantly trained for, just remember that your real job is that if you are free, you need to free somebody else. If you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else. John Wesley Young, professor of mathematics at Dartmouth and MAA president in the early 20th century, agreed with this. He said, the roots and trunk and branches of the tree of mathematics are quite as important as the blossom or the fruit, and the former must exhibit healthy life if the latter are to be produced at all. That is, we can't have research mathematics without a really healthy community of mathematicians. He said there is important work for all of us. The sin of the mathematician is not that they don't do research. The sin is idleness when there is work to be done. Whatever your ability is, there is work for you to do for the greater glory of mathematics. I really felt personally what John Wesley Young was saying and what Toni Morrison was saying, that it's my responsibility to do something else. So my husband and I, my husband, Stephen Kennedy, is also a mathematician, and we decided to start the Carleton College Summer Mathematics Program for women. So I want to back up just a little bit and tell you why this was how we thought we wanted to start, why we chose this as our avenue for giving back to the math community. So it kind of starts with my growing up. I knew that I wanted to be a teacher when I was in elementary school. I didn't know what age I wanted to teach, but I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I knew I wanted to teach math by the time I was in high school. But my father was a factory worker, and my mother was an assistant in an elementary school. Neither one of them had gone to college. I was first generation college, and I knew nothing about picking a college. So I grew up in Iowa in a farming community. And when it was time to go to college, I went to a shopping mall and went to an activity or a college fair at a shopping mall, and went up to a table where, all the little colleges in central Iowa or in Iowa had tables where you could go up and ask questions. So I went up to this first table, and the person there was so friendly. He was nice, and he asked me questions, and he told me stories, and we got along really well. And I thought, wow, I really have a connection with this guy. I'm really going to have a connection with that institution. It didn't occur to me at the time, showing my naivete, that it was his job to be friendly to everyone who walked up to the table. So it didn't occur to me that maybe I should check out other institutions. And what was even worse for me was that I did not realize that colleges and universities had different math offerings. I thought every college and every university just had the same curriculum, and they were located in different places. So I could decide where I wanted to go to school, and I would get the same math education no matter where I went. That was not the case. I went to a wonderful liberal arts college in Iowa that specialized in opera. And that's where I went to study mathematics, assuming that I would get the same math education that I would get anywhere. So this didn't actually occur to me that I wasn't getting the same education that people were getting other places until I went to graduate school. Now, I only got into Northwestern because they didn't require math GREs. I had a very poor background in mathematics. I did not have any real analysis, and I only had half of a semester of abstract algebra. Now, for those of you who are undergraduates thinking about graduate school, take as much real analysis and as much abstract algebra as you can. For me, I was not prepared. I had a very poor experience making the transition to Northwestern. There was one saving factor for me, and that was, well, let me tell you, when I went to visit Northwestern after I'd been accepted while I was still an undergraduate, I went there and there were 40 faculty members, one of whom was a woman, and 40 graduate students, one of whom was a woman. And this was the environment that I was going to. I thought, oh, I've been just one of few women before, it'll be fine. I didn't realize how underprepared I was academically. So fortunately for me, the summer before I started graduate school, the graduate director at Northwestern accepted a class of 12 students to start that year. And my advisor later, years later, told me about that summer. He said, I went in and I talked to the graduate advisor and I said, how many women do we have coming this year? And he said, I don't think we have any. And my advisor said, well, that's crazy. We've talked as a department that we need to increase the number of women in graduate school. And the graduate school advisor said, oh, you can look at the files, but I don't think we accepted any. And my advisor looked at the files and half of the entering class was women. So the graduate school advisor hadn't paid any attention to the gender, and half of the entering class was women. Now, it was those women that helped me form a community in graduate school and give me the strength to keep going when I wanted to quit. It was that community, this group of people that we became friends with. We studied together. We did everything together. We even took this old building you see here on the left and gussied it up and threw, it's called Lunt Hall, and we threw a Lunt Hall ball where we dressed up in old silly dresses and had a big party together. It was fun. We enjoyed each other and we supported each other. After I finished graduate school, my first visiting position as a professor was at the St. Olaf Math Department. At that time was an excellent time for me to be going there because, okay, this was in the 90s, but let me back up for them. In the 70s and 80s, there were these 4 professors, Lynn Steen, Arthur Seebach, Lauren Larson, and Ted Vesey at St. Olaf, who had a different philosophy on mathematics. It was very radical at the time. This idea that this big tent philosophy, which is anybody can be a mathematics major. Before that, you would find in mathematics departments, if you didn't get straight A's in your classes, you would get weeded out and you would not be welcomed into mathematics. But these 4 mathematicians had this idea that even C students have to major in something. Why shouldn't they major in math? Math is a great subject. So they had this idea that everyone should be welcome in mathematics. So they began something called a contract major, where if you wanted to major in mathematics, you would go into one of them and you would sit down and say, I want to major in mathematics. And they would use this as an opportunity to tell you about all the cool things you can do in mathematics and all the opportunities there are in the department. And they would, in this conversation, they would explain to you that you were welcome in this department and that you belonged with them and that the major belonged to you as well. So they grew at the beginning in the 70s and 80s, they had 18 majors a year in mathematics. By the time I arrived in the 90s, they had 120 majors a year. And that all came because they were welcoming people into the major. So it was in this ethos that my husband and I were thinking about, what can we do to help the mathematical community? And so we decided that we would start the summer program. So we were going to have this 2-pronged approach. We were going to run a summer program for women finishing their first or second year of undergraduate. That's really early. They would just be done with 1 or maybe 2 years of undergraduate, and we would catch them at an early stage, and we were giving them the mentoring and the advice they need to prepare for getting into graduate school. So, you can't be told when you're a senior what courses you should take as an undergraduate. It's too late. So we were trying to catch them as first or second years, at the end of their first or second year, to give them some advice. We also wanted to set them up with a community of women with similar interests that would have their back and remind them at those crucial moments that they belong. I want to do a little shout out to Lloyd Douglas, who was working at the National Science Foundation at the time, and he really understood. So this is 1995, we're talking 94 when we applied for the grant. He really understood at that time the importance of building these kind of communities. He was way ahead of his time. And he started many of the communities that I mentioned earlier. It was through his support at the NSF that those were started. So our program ran 4 weeks every summer. We got 18 undergraduates, women or non-binary or trans men from across the country who wanted to come study with us. And we hired 2 TAs to work with them. We brought in some wonderful established professional women to come in and work. There's my husband, Steve Kennedy, in the lower right-hand corner. And we brought them in to teach the courses. So we had 2 classes, and they would take classes that wouldn't normally be taught at an undergraduate institution. So low dimensional topology or p-adic analysis or a variety of other courses that you wouldn't see as an undergraduate, but had sort of a low threshold, high ceiling kind of thing. We gave them lots of social time to get to know each other. And then after the summer program, we would keep in touch with all of them throughout the school year on a listserv. Each one of these summer programs, they kept in touch with each other. So these 18 undergraduates plus 2 TAs would chat all year long about, what are you doing for Pi Day? Where are you applying to graduate school? What courses are you taking? They would chat with each other all year long in these little communities. But it was Suzanne Boyd who was our first person to earn a PhD. If you think about it, we were catching them after their first or second year of an undergraduate. So it was a number of years before someone earned a PhD, 7 to be exact, 7 years after. But when Suzanne Boyd got her PhD, she wrote to her listserv, she wrote to the Carleton SMP community, "This past year wins by a mile the roughest, craziest, most frustrating year of my life award. Applying for jobs, finishing my dissertation, and arranging to move all at the same time. If any of you out there will be finishing your thesis sometime in the next few years, feel free to give me a call and chat about the process. It's okay if we've never met before. Just tell me you went to SMP." For Stephen and me, this last line was so radical, such an interesting idea. It wasn't that they all had to, these people weren't forming a community just in their little summer group. They wanted to reach between communities and talk to each other, reach between these summer programs. So Suzanne was saying to anyone who had been through the summer program, even if she hadn't met them, contact me if you want some help. So before, at the joint mathematics meetings, that's the JMM, in 2005, we had, by that time, was that 7 people had earned their PhDs in mathematics who had gone through the summer program. So we thought, oh, it'd be really fun to get them all together. If a lot of people go to the JMM, maybe we'll see them there. Let's have a dinner, and we might as well invite anyone else who's been through SMP and see, and get them all together. So we made this plan that we were going to get everybody together at the JMM that year in 2005, and we were going to meet for dinner. And I was thinking, well, we have all these different summer programs. Some of them were in the summer program for 2002, and some of them were in the summer program for 95, and they're not going to know each other. So I'm a planner and I made plans. I made a list and I wrote down a whole bunch of icebreaker activities so that they could talk to each other. But when Stephen and I arrived at the restaurant a few minutes late, there 35 people, they were already there and they were yakking so much. We couldn't even interrupt them. They were talking about, who's your advisor and what classes did you take and what graduate schools did you apply to and how do you do this part, or how, did you do any REUs? They just wanted to talk to each other and they were sharing all this wonderful information. We just sat back and listened. It was beautiful. So at that summer, we only had 7 PhDs to that point, but that summer we had another 7 people finish with their PhDs. And we thought, well, we should start bringing these PhDs back to Carleton each summer to talk to the undergraduates. So that's what we started doing. In 2005, we had our first symposium. I thought the name was pretty clever. Stephen named that. For PhDs who'd gone through the summer program. So they talked to each other about their research. This is a picture of the first group of PhDs who came back for the symposium. And for those of you who are from Carleton, that's in Leighton Hall right there. They get career advice from the instructors and the directors of the program, and they could mentor the current summer program participants. So I remember taking this picture. All the undergraduates were sitting to my right as I took it. And I was sitting by these PhDs and I heard this one undergraduate. She looked at the PhDs and she turned around and looked at all the undergraduates sitting beside her and behind her. And she looked at PhDs and she said, wait, they all have their PhDs and they were in this program a few years ago. And you could just see it dawn on her that this was the first time she'd ever thought about, I could do this. I could go on and get my PhD and I could be on this panel in a few years. It still makes me tear up when I think about this. It was just such a powerful moment where she realized she could do this too. So we had them talk to each other and mentor each other. And then each year we would bring back the new PhDs. So in 2006, we had a whole nother group of PhDs graduate and we invited them back to come back to campus. Now, a back of the envelope calculation shows that if we compare the number, we were wondering how we were doing years ago. We were wondering, how are we doing about getting women who could be successful in graduate school? So we compared the number of women entering graduate school in groups 1, 2, and 3 departments of mathematics. 1, 2, and 3 departments, don't worry about what that means. It just means departments that have PhDs in mathematics in the US. So we looked at the number of women entering those programs 2001 to 2005, and then the number of women finishing those PhDs in the same departments 2006 to 2010 as sort of a proxy for the number who were finishing their PhDs, because we couldn't get the exact names to line up. And we saw about a 26% persistence rate to PhD. And other studies have shown that it's about a quarter of the students who started would go on to get PhDs. And then we looked at what happened for the SMPers. The persistence rate to PhD for SMP alumni in the same time period was 63%. 2/3 of the women who started PhDs in mathematics went on to complete them. And I think it's because they knew that they had friends who had their back. They had this community and they felt confident in going on. And every year we would have more people graduating with their PhDs who had gone through the summer program. Now I want you to notice this, like, look here, in 2007, we have somebody from Xavier University, Gettysburg University, Alfred University. These are small schools, and we weren't cherry picking the very top students from the very top schools to come to the summer program. We were picking students who needed to get this extra community, this extra boost to help them along the way. And it seemed to be working. And then in 2010, we added another aspect of the summer program, of this community, and that is we were taking care of women as they were undergraduates, and we were taking care of them once they got their PhDs. We were reconnecting with them, but the whole time they were in graduate school, we felt so bad we weren't doing anything with the women in graduate school. So in 2010, we started a graduate education workshop where grad students receive mentoring and advice relevant to their current situation, what stage they were in graduate school. And the graduate students gave practice talks and received feedback on their talks. So it was like prepping for job talks at the time. And then we had more people finishing their PhDs. We had such success with the symposium participants, the women who came back and were role models for our undergraduates, that we asked a couple of them to stay on and spend several weeks with us during the summer program to be a role model for the undergraduates. And that worked really well. And then the last aspect that we added to our community was in 2012, we were having such a good time and everyone was benefiting from these role models that we decided the undergraduates who were at Carleton each summer should reach out to local communities and give back to the local communities. So we went to a blue-collar community near Carleton, Faribault, and we started going to summer camps and summer programs in Faribault and reaching out to them. You can see this is one of my favorite pictures in the lower right-hand corner. The summer program students literally tied the summer camp students in knots, and then we untied them and we talked about knot theory to this group of little kids. And more women and non-binary people were finishing their PhDs. Jen Bowen said, SMP was the beginning of my mathematical mentoring journey. I not only benefited from my mentors, but simultaneously this mathematical community facilitated me becoming a future mentor. So she's now talking about how she is paying it forward. After finishing her PhD, she has gone on to other things. I now serve as a department chair at a small liberal arts college, advisor to many math majors, but also as part of a Posse Foundation as a faculty mentor to 10 students. SMP gave me the motivation to sustain a graduate student mentoring program for 8 years at the joint math meetings, and now an experiential learning program, Women Who Count, at my own institution. I'm forever grateful and proud to be part of the SMP community. It's just so heartwarming to see how these people who got some mentoring early in their careers realize the importance of mentoring, and they pay it forward. They pay it forward and give it mentoring to future undergraduates or future graduate students, and more people earning their PhDs. Pam Richardson said, my SMP family is incredibly supportive. I always feel like the community wants me to succeed and everyone will do what they can to make sure that happens. I gain lifelong friends, not just professional colleagues, through SMP. And more PhDs. Becky Swanson said, as a college sophomore from a tiny school in the middle of nowhere, I arrived at SMP thinking that I would learn some mathematics for a few weeks in the summer, and that would be it. I certainly learned some very interesting mathematics, but just as importantly, or more importantly, I developed friendships and made connections with other women interested in math. It was at SMP that my instructor, Karen Brooks, asked me if I was planning to go to graduate school. It was the first time that anyone had asked me that question. It was a life-changing moment in which I began to realize that I belonged to a mathematics community. The summer program is no longer running, but the SMP community is still alive, well, and strong, and I'm proud and thankful to be a member. Our funding ended in 2014, and at that point, the NSF had a different direction they were going in, so they didn't renew our funding. And the summer program itself ended, although I still keep in touch with all these people, and we still have reunions and get back together. And we're still graduating PhDs. I don't know if you've heard Rachel Maddow talk about her experience at Rockefeller University, where she went to give an award at the university. And as she was walking to the auditorium, she walked down this hallway. And I'm sure you've all seen these kind of hallways where it's just framed portrait after framed portrait of just white guy, white guy, white guy, dead white guy, all the way down the hallway. And she said, "What's with the dude wall?" And this really resonated with me because I certainly have seen these dude walls much of the time in my experience, my many years in the profession. But I have a new version of the dude wall, and that's this. These are all women who came to a little month-long summer program in the middle of Minnesota and now hold PhDs in a mathematical science. This is what I like to think of when I think of a dude wall. So what are the outcomes? Of the 343 women, people who are non-binary and trans men who joined our S&P community as undergraduates, 134 hold a PhD in a mathematical science. How do we count that? We count it as mathematics, computer science, statistics, or math education. And if you're thinking, some people may think of the 134, they're probably all in math education. That's not true. Most of the 134 are in mathematics, with just a few in CS, statistics, and math education. 11 more hold a PhD in a cognate discipline like economics, something that uses mathematics. More than 80 more hold terminal master's degrees. So they wanted to get a master's degree to go on and do something for a career. And a handful more are still in graduate school. About 2/3 of the students who joined our program as a first or second year undergraduate went on to earn an advanced degree in mathematics. I like to believe, and I think I have evidence to show, that funding our community was an investment in the future of American mathematics, and that interest is still accruing in the sense of these people have gone on to mentor future generations, future groups of students. Melinda Lania said that S&P is where I realized that I could be a mathematician and that this was a possible career path for me. Because of this program, I discovered and attended Budapest semesters in mathematics. Because of this program, I applied to and attended an REU. Because of this program, I went to graduate school in math. However, the most important thing S&P became to me is an extended math family. I never expected to be able to connect to so many wonderful math women across all stages, from applying to graduate school all the way to having made it in an established career. S&P isn't just a program, it's a giant supportive family. Kristen Courtney said, beyond a summer program, which in itself was enriching and rewarding, S&P has created a network of confident and informed women in mathematics who constantly and consistently support, encourage, and enable one another. This web of connections has bolstered and emboldened so many women to pursue a career in mathematics and to persist when faced with the inevitable difficulties therein. I will readily count myself among these, and for that and so much more, I thank you. So I said that the adding new people in to the S&P community has stopped. We don't have a summer program anymore, but I did not want to let the work that we have been doing stop. So I have gone on to do two other things with Della Dumba, who was a visitor, a frequent visitor to the summer math program. One is we've collected stories of these communities that are so successful supporting members of underrepresented groups, not just women, but people of color and other groups underrepresented in mathematics, LGBTQ communities and such. We've gathered their stories, 26 stories, into a book called Count Me In. And Della and I host a podcast called Count Me In with Della and Deanna, in which we interview a number of really interesting mathematicians to show their humanity, to show what their experiences were growing up and who supported them along their way. I highly recommend that you listen to the stories of these people. The quote that I had earlier from Talithia Williams, she was one of the people that we interviewed in our 3 seasons of this podcast. So here are my final thoughts as I'm wrapping this up. If we are intentional in building communities, we can support people who already do mathematics, and we can welcome into mathematics members of populations who have not traditionally felt that they belong here. Having these communities does not in any way harm anyone who is already going to do mathematics. It just supports some other people. Building these communities and welcoming people into mathematics is incredibly professionally rewarding and not that hard. I'm sure that the organizers of OURFA²M can attest to this, that how rewarding it is to see the success of your program bringing people together. It's just an incredibly amazing feeling. I love getting together with former participants in our summer program, and it really wasn't that hard to do. These folks have made their own inroads into building communities and welcoming new generations. Building a community has an exponential positive effect on mathematics. So I recommend that you find your community. If you're not in a community, find one. If you can't find one, make one. Create a community in your department, amongst your peers. Tell people that they are welcome in mathematics, that they are not alone. What gives you the right to do this? Because you are not alone and you belong. Thank you very much for inviting me here. I've really enjoyed getting to share some thoughts with you, and I'm happy to take any questions if you want. Thank you.